What do McDonald's, Mentos, and politicians have in common? They're all really, really good at getting you to do things that you may not have ordinarily done. That is, they're really good at manipulating you. Now, you may know that, right? You may think that you know that. But the reality is that we're influenced without our knowledge and without our consent all day, every day. And we think that most of our lives are actually run by us. We think most of the thoughts that we have are original thoughts. We think most of the actions that we take are of our own free will. But is that really true? With so many people out there trying to influence us, and that goes for large corporations, that goes for politicians, that goes for even the people in our lives. With all of these people trying to influence us on a daily basis, how much of what we think, feel, and do really actually is up to us? That's one of the most important questions that you can ask yourself, because what you really want is you really probably want to be able to express yourself. Who are you? What do you want to do in this life? What are you really here to express? And if other people are hijacking your mind and hijacking your actions, can you really do that? And you may think to yourself, well, it's not really possible. My mind is a fortress and nobody can get into my mind. But the reality is that we have fundamental ways that human beings are built, and those are a lot easier to get past if you know what the code is. Let's dive into an experiment really quickly to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. There is a very, very famous study, and it is called the Milgram Experiment. There's a guy named Stanley Milgram at Yale University, and he did this in 1963. So, kind of a long time ago, but turns out humans have been human for a really long time. So, he was looking into how was it possible that the people who were put on trial, the Nuremberg trials for the atrocities during the Holocaust during World War II, how come they kept saying they were just following orders? And was it possible that people who committed the worst of the worst atrocities were just following orders? And he wanted to know if that was true or not, if that was even possible that that was the case. So he did this experiment at Yale University. And frankly, I don't think that this type of experiment would have been allowed to be done now, but it was allowed to be done then. What he did is he put an ad in the paper and he got 40 participants to come in to Yale to do this study. So these are people who age ranges between 20 and 50 years old, whose jobs were either professional or unskilled. I mean, it was the wide range, and they were in the New Haven area. So they responded to this ad in this newspaper. And basically, what happened is two participants would come in. Only one of them wouldn't be an actual participant, it would be an actor. And they would come into the Yale lab, and there would be one person who was the participant, one person was an actor. They were told that they needed to draw whether they were going to be the teacher of a certain skill or a learner of a certain skill. So the teacher was always the participant, and the learner or the student was always the actor. And they drew at random, but it wasn't actually random. So they were taken into these rooms, and there was a man in a lab coat, right? In a very professional looking lab coat. They were in a very professional setting, Yale University. And they were told that the teacher had to test the learner on whether they knew or understood particular pairs, right? So it would be one pair or another pair. And if the learner, the student, got it wrong, then the teacher would have to deliver an electric shock to them. Now, this electric shock ranged all the way from, let's see, what was it? It ranged all the way from 15 volts, which is a small shock, to 450 volts, which, if sustained, can actually kill somebody. So this is a pretty extensive range of volts. And they wanted to see what would happen if They encouraged the teacher to shock the participant every single time they got it wrong. What do you think happened? So they had the actor in the other room, and the actor was screaming and screaming every time they got shocked. And they were talking about having a heart condition and being afraid of dying. And yet, all participants reached 300 volts of shock, which is a dangerous level. And 63% of the participants went all the way to a 450 volt shock. Let that sink in for a second. There are a couple of factors here that led to that, because we might think under certain circumstances we would never be influenced to do something. But this experiment is only one of many that proves otherwise. Here are a couple of key factors here. The first is the set and the setting. They were not sitting around and their family was playing the white lab coat guy and the other person in the other room was not your cousin. These were situations where everything around gave a particular appearance. The man in the white lab coat looked very professional, and we associate certain outfits with particular things. It's why things like like dressing up as a spy or dressing up as a business person, for example, they tell you to dress for the job that you want, right? Because people give you the authority that they see with the way that you look. So if you are dressed in a white lab coat, for example, people will assume that you are some type of research professional or doctor of some kind. And they will give you authority in that way. So authority was a big player here. Now, look at the people above you. Look at the politicians of the world. Look at the business leaders. How many times have people like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, who is now shown to be somebody who perhaps does not have people's best interest at heart, and many other billionaires, for example, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, how often are those people touted as the people that you should be more like? A study came out a few years ago, I think it was maybe 2017 or 2019, that came out that said Amazon had at least 4,000 homeless employees. I don't know whether they have that now or not, but it is very well known that Amazon has a very challenging time with its employees, whereas Jeff Bezos has more money than he could spend in probably several lifetimes. Is that the type of person you really want to be like? And this is the same across pretty much all of the billionaires. A lot of things have come out that billionaires, in fact, do some real shady stuff, but they're still touted as authorities for how to live your life. Is it any wonder that we have so much cognitive dissonance, which means that we have so much issue with the idea that being wealthy or having money is the thing that we want? When we look at so many people who are wealthy and we really do think, wow, money must really be the root of all evil. Yet it really isn't. So authority is a really big piece of this. It is the same with politicians. It's the same with political leaders. It's the same with anything that has somebody at the top of an organization telling you that this is the way that things are. That's also the case with mainstream media. Mainstream media, for example, is a source of authority. That's someplace that you go to for trusted news. But how accurate is it really? And we'll do another show on how accurate the mainstream media is, but it is extremely, extremely inaccurate in terms of its reporting, like the reality of what it reports versus what they report. Okay, the next piece of that is that these people were alone. And in one of Milgram's later experiments, he tested this. If there was one other person rebelling against this situation, against harming the person in the other room, that participant was substantially more likely to fight it out and to not deliver those electric shocks if there was only one other person in there who was a rebel. And that's why strength in numbers is actually really important. So the reality is that we are substantially more influenced than we think we are. But let's figure out what to do about it, because that's kind of a challenging thing, right? So what's allowing us to be so influenced right now? The first thing is that we are overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed by the amount of information coming at us from every single direction. If you look at the level of anxiety now versus where it was even 20, 30, 50 years ago, it's very, very different. But the reality is that if you want to find something stressful, all you have to do is scroll through social media. It used to be that if an alligator ate a person in Florida, you would have never heard about it. You would never know that it even happened. So your fear of getting eaten by an alligator on a golf course probably would have been zero. But now, if that happens, there are people filming it and people are disseminating that information all over the place. And so now millions of people see something that's very traumatic and extremely unlikely to happen to them, unlikely to happen to you. But because you're seeing it and more things like that, it is very, very easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to get overwhelmed with the state of the world. The world is extremely challenging right now, in between recession, in between inflation, in between changing world order. And if you follow us on our other channel, Geopolitics and Conflict, you know some of the things that are going on in the world that can be extremely challenging to stomach. But that leaves you where? Exhausted, stressed out, overwhelmed, not knowing what to do. So here's the solution, or here's a solution should you choose to go about it for yourself. The first way to not be manipulated by anybody is to learn who you are. What do you really want in your life? And a really great way to figure that out, because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to just ask yourself, what do I want? So take a moment and during your day, actually observe how you feel about what is happening. For example, if you are having dinner with a friend and it's not going very well, but you haven't really been able to separate yourself from that friend, ask yourself this question: do I want more of this or do I want less of this? Go through your entire day for 5 days and ask yourself as often as possible, do I want more of what's happening or do I want less? You will naturally start to gravitate away from the things that you want less of and towards the things you want more of. The next thing, and maybe the most important thing you can do, is to surround yourself with rebels. Surround yourself with people you actually want to be like, not the people that others tell you you should want to be like, but the people you actually want to be like, people you actually respect and admire. And this may not be an easy jump for you. You may not be surrounded by those people. And in fact, you're probably not if you haven't actively gone out and tried to find people like that. But take a look. Even if what you do is you delete your social media feed of all of the people and all of the things that have been making you feel bad that you want less of, and start adding people that you respect and actually admire on your social media feeds. It is a great first step. And as you get more and more of that input, the input of the behavior that the people who you want your life to be more like, as you get more of that input, you will start to figure out who you are and what you want more. Remember, in the Milgram experiments, he did 18 variations of this experiment. And when there was even one other person who stood up and was a rebel, That is when the participants found their courage. We are meant to be with other people. We are not meant to do this alone. We are not meant to be alone. We are meant to be with other people who lift us up. So, whatever you have to do to go find people who lift you up and to be around them, even if it is hard and even if it is scary to meet new people, you must surround yourself with people who lift you up. Anyway, stay strong, and I will see you in the next video.